All right. So, hello everyone, and welcome to the second presentation of our security training for developers. I would like to start by saying thank you all for joining us today to learn more about security and security best practices and overall how to deliver safer projects to the world. Also, we're really excited to have you all here, so let's get started. First, we're going to be starting with some logistics. The way we design this training is in three parts. First part is foundations and system security, which is the training right now. And we're going to have two more sessions probably next year, so stay tuned for those announcements. This is the second presentation of the foundations and system security. Marta already has held an amazing presentation yesterday on two topics, introduction to security and also workstation security. So if you haven't had the chance to join that presentation, we will be publishing a recording soon. And I highly recommend that you watch it. It was deeply insightful, so take a look. On today's agenda, again, this presentation is going to be split into sections. Each section should take around 15 to 20 minutes. And at the end of it, we will be having a quiz that one of my colleagues will share in the chat. It's a really simple quiz. It has around 4 or 5 questions. So please take a minute to just test your knowledge and everything you've retained from this presentation. Also, if any questions pop up during the time I'm presenting, we have a full house here, so the entire security team is present. So if you have questions, just drop them in the chat and we will be answering them. So let's get started. The first section that we're going to be talking about is account security. So to start off, who is responsible for keeping your accounts safe? And whenever kind of talking about account security, there's always this kind of assumption that comes up that security should be an out-of-the-box guarantee from the platforms or companies that you create an account for. And to be honest, my view on it is that this responsibility falls kind of in the middle, while these companies do their best to provide safeguards to keep your accounts safe. You should also take a proactive approach in protecting your personal information and kind of being aware of all the security features and options that you have available. So how to keep your account safe? This is exactly what we're going to be discussing about today. So to begin with, the first subject is passwords. And passwords are the front line of defense whenever you're creating a new account. And depending on how you're creating these passwords, you can make attackers and hackers' lives easier or more complicated, near to impossible. So, in order to make it impossible for them to hijack your account, you need to follow some password best practices. And a couple of the most important ones would be to use strong and complex passwords. So you should aim to have a length of at least 8 characters, but in this context, the more the better. And it should comprise of a mix of characters, numbers, and symbols. Then you should strive to have unique passwords for each website. And this is kind of a controversial one because it kind of why should you have different passwords? They are hard to remember. So we're going to be talking about that in the next slide. And then a third best practice would be to use password managers. They are tools that basically allow you to store hundreds of different passwords. So we talked about having unique passwords for each website. And the reason this is recommended is that, generally speaking, although it's unfortunate, companies have data breaches. So attackers might try to attack a company, and sometimes they are successful. And as such, they gain access to some databases, and in the end, they can access your login information, so your username and password combination. And generally, what happens is that these databases, so this information is leaked on the internet, where everybody can basically see them. And attackers might try to use this username and password combination and try them across other platforms. So in the event that you've reused a password on across multiple accounts, they didn't just get access to that one account that was compromised. They get access to everything or to a bunch of them. So you should keep them unique. And a couple of strategies to generate unique passwords would be to do a random generation, as in this example. This is very difficult to crack, but also very difficult to remember. There's also the option to have passphrases, which are combinations of random words. Again, they're hard to crack, but easier to remember. And let's say that you're able to do this random generation for one or two accounts. But then when we're talking about this at scale, because nobody in the world nowadays has only two accounts. When we're talking about this at scale, let's say you have 20 or 30 or 40 accounts, it becomes unfeasible to remember all of them. So in order to keep the unique property, you should use password managers. So you don't have to remember all of them. Password managers are tools that help you to securely generate, store, and organize all account level credentials. They come in various forms. They can come as apps or browser extensions, whatever you feel like best fits your needs. And apart from helping you manage all these unique passwords, they have a bunch of additional features that are really good for day-to-day operations and also for improving your efficiency as developers. So they have autofill feature. So whenever you want to log into one of your accounts, the password manager just pre-fills your username and password combination for you. Other than that, it has secure sharing features. So, for example, if you want to share a token with a coworker, you are able to send it via a password manager instead of unsecure communication channel. They have expiry notifications, so in case one of your tokens expires, you can use it to let you know and to generate a new one. They can be cross-platform, they can provide offline access, and they also help you identify if you have any compromised passwords, so you know that you have to change them because they might have appeared in a data breach. In terms of things you can store in a password manager, well, you can store a lot of things apart from passwords. You can also keep in there PII, so personal identifiable information, also banking information such as credit card details, developer credentials, and also they sometimes have the feature to have secure notes, which is this kind of free form text area where you can keep anything you want securely in the password manager. Um, and we've added here a couple of password manager tools examples, be it open source or proprietary, but the main thing to keep in mind would be to choose whichever tool is better suited to your needs. So we talked about the passwords, which are the first line of defense. Now we're going to talk about a second line of defense, which is multi-factor authentication. So when you log in onto a website, first line of defense is a user password combination, but these unfortunately can leak. So what we can do instead to better protect our accounts is to go into our settings and enable MFA. And usually when you do that on your accounts, it prompts you with a bunch of options that you can choose from as your second factor. These options can be kind of grouped into three categories. They can either be something that you have, for example, a smartphone app or a hardware token or via SMS, something you are for biometrics, and something you know, for example, these security questions. Why to enable MFA? Because it blocks a wide array of attacks. So let's take the most common one, which would be a phishing attack. In this event, what the threat actor would do is to try to trick users via fake websites or emails to give their username and password combinations themselves to the attacker. So you're basically handing the key to your account yourself to these attackers. But what they would try to do afterwards is try to log in into your account. If you have MFA enabled, they will not be able to do so even when they have your credentials. So we talked about risks, and now the only question that remains is we have so many options available to choose from. Which one should I choose? And how I like to answer this question is that any type of MFA is better than having no MFA at all. But as a general rule, the highest security is provided by hardware tokens, so security keys. So if you have the option to acquire one, I highly advise you to use security keys across all of your accounts. All right, so far we discussed passwords and MFA. So the next topic that I would like to talk about is what do we do with important credentials? And I want to start by first defining what we mean by important credentials. These are the ones that often come without second factor authentication. So a couple of examples would be tokens with high permissions, for example, the ones that we use on GitHub or GitLab. They can be mail tokens for mail-based workflows, package manager tokens, private keys for signing, or SSH keys, for example. So, how do we handle credentials in a secure manner? There are a couple of best practices that I want us to go through today. We're also going to go through a couple of don'ts and a couple of things to do on a periodic basis to ensure these credentials are kept secure and away from attackers. So in terms of do's or best practices, first of all, we should limit the number of machines that we keep them on, only to those really needed. So whenever you're generating, for example, a new API token, rather than just going to all the machines you have available and pasting that token into just in case, I would advise to simply wait for a time when you actually need that specific credential on the machine and just then transfer it over to the machine. Um, because having it in as few places as possible definitely decreases the risk of them being leaked. Other than that, you should try to hide credentials from the console history. So for example, here, when you need an API token, what would usually do when you need it to be in the environment, what we'd usually do is just go to a CLI and export it, like export variable equal token. Why we advise not to do that is because history is kept, it's saved, and just in case your machine is compromised, attackers might go to the history. It's a tactic that used heavily and retrieve a bunch of credentials or keys that they shouldn't have access to from there. Instead, if you need it, you could source a script file instead of exporting it directly in shell. Other than that, you should keep them on encrypted file systems. And in terms of CI, we highly advise to have different sets of credentials. So have a set of tokens or keys for your own personal use for development, and then create a separate one for CI tools that are bot owned and only used by automated systems. In terms of don'ts now, you should generally try to avoid committing unencrypted credentials in version control. The reason behind this is that code repositories and even private ones can still be breached. So instead, try to use alternative strategies. These depend a lot on your project or setup details, but a couple of ideas would be to use environment variables or vaults. And also, if you have to keep them in files, use gitignore to ignore those sensitive files. And if you accidentally committed unencrypted credentials in version control, keep in mind that you should remove the secrets from Git history as well as fast as possible. And another thing that should be avoided is to send important credentials via email or chat. And this is sometimes, unfortunately, a common practice, but the reason why you should avoid this is because communication channels can be insecure, or the access control is not finally grained. And what I mean by access control not finally grained is that you might sometimes want to share it in a channel where not all the people need or should have access to those credentials. So instead of using this communication channel, you should use secret sharing tools, which allow them to share with your coworkers securely. In terms of in terms of corner cases, let's say, if your credentials are leaked, then the first thing you should do is to revoke and rotate those credentials. And after the fire has been put out, you should try to investigate audit logs for any unauthorized access attempts from attackers. If you do not know how to do this yourself, you should reach out to your security team because this is our job and they will definitely be able to help you with this. And in terms of things that should be done on a periodic basis, you should periodically audit credential access. And what I mean by this is to review who has access to important credentials for your project and revoke that access if it's no longer needed for that specific person. For example, a colleague switching teams and things like that. And in parallel to password managers, which are used to manage your passwords, we have for important credentials, secret managers, which are tools that help you to securely store, manage, and rotate system level credentials. They have role-based access control, encryption, logging, and monitoring, and integration with cloud services. So a bunch of features that could be really useful in your development. And we've listed again a couple of examples of open source secret managers as well as proprietary ones. Again, choose whichever tool is better suited to your needs and the needs of your project and your setup and so on. And lastly, the last topic is hardware tokens. We've mentioned them briefly during MFA because they provide the strongest security options for MFA. So we're just going to add a couple of more details about it. They usually come as USB. And what are hardware tokens? They're actually physical devices. They are physical security keys that you can use as a second factor. So whenever you're creating a new account, select the security key option. And what you need to do is to plug it into your laptop and simply touch it. And that's all you have to do to set it up. Again, when you want to log in into that account again in the future, you would need to take your key, plug it into your laptop again, and just touch it. And this is basically all you have to do. You should look for security key that's in FIDO2 standard, and depending on your provider of choice, you should look up how they're doing firmware updates, so you're on top of that as well. In terms of best practices for security keys, it's recommended to have two, one as main and one as backup that you add to the same set of applications. The backup one stays in a safe place, and the reason we recommend two is just in case your main one breaks or you lose it, you're not completely locked out of your devices. And try to keep it with yourself at all time. For example, Marta has her token on the house key lock. Do not leave it at the office unsupervised. And the price for two tokens would be around €100, so definitely not that much. And you could definitely ask your company to pay for it. It improves the overall security posture, so it's definitely a good investment. That's it for the first part. Now I'm going to propose kind of an exercise that you can do on your own in your time. So the risk analysis of your accounts. I want you to take some time to think about which development accounts do you have and which credentials do you have. And for each of these, after you've done kind of this inventory exercise, to think about ways that they can leak. It's a good mental exercise to try to put together all the accounts that you have and like the potential risks that they have. And after this exercise, I also linked a couple of readings that are interesting. We have the Have I Been Pwned site. It's really useful to check if your account was leaked in a data breach, especially so you're notified of that and you're able to rapidly change your passwords that have been affected. And another interesting read would be best practices for passwords and passphrases from the Canadian Centre of Cybersecurity. So thank you for the attention. My colleagues should also link a quiz for this section that you can take. I will pause for 1 minute so you're able to read a question to kind of test your knowledge on what we've just discussed. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Because of time concerns, I'm going to be handing over the mic to Marta right now, as she will be presenting the second section of today. Thank you for your all attention.